Welcome to McNulty's Book Corral. I'm your host, Bond, James Bond. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're talking about one of the greatest series of adventure novels ever published, Ian Fleming's magnificent James Bond series. And boy, I can talk about Ian Fleming and James Bond all day. You know, I read these books for the first time as a child, believe it or not. No, I was not a child prodigy. I just happened to be able to live in a household where I was encouraged to pick up and read anything and everything that was available. And of course, James Bond paperbacks by Ian Fleming were widely available in the 1960s, and I was very familiar with the motion pictures from the beginning. So I was a huge James Bond fan, which led me to becoming a fan of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and I Spy, etc., etc. So James Bond has a very special place in my heart, and the books are, in my humble, educated opinion, masterpieces. The very first James Bond novel was Casino Royale. Here's a reprint paperback from the 70s. I'll have scans of some of these books at the end. And Casino Royale is probably considered by most readers the best of the Bond novels. I think it was published in the 1950s, early 1950s, by the way, so during the Cold War. Ian Fleming was a fan and contemporary of Raymond Chandler, by the way, who created Philip Marlowe. There's even on one of the motion picture audio commentaries, they have an audio commentary of Ian Fleming and Raymond Chandler speaking together. Raymond Chandler had an influence on Ian Fleming. But Ian Fleming took it and he ran with it. From this point on, it takes off. Other great notable books, of course, you're all familiar with the movies. And Sean Connery recently passed away. Very sad. He was for me, James Bond. I do love all of the other movies. You know, all of the actors added something to the mythology of Bond. But Connery was special. So, in tribute to Connery, let's talk about some of these great books. They were published in the following order: Casino Royale, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia with Love, Dr. No, Goldfinger, Thunderball, The Spy Who Loved Me, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, and The Man with the Golden Gun. Now, some of the, those are the novels. Some of the other works were short stories that Fleming published, and some of those were published during his lifetime. Those are collected in Quantum of Solace. This is a Penguin, more recent edition, which collects all of those short stories, the complete short stories that Fleming wrote relating to James Bond. And that includes From a View to a Kill, For Your Eyes Only, Quantum of Solace, Ricicchio, The Hildebrand Rarity, Octopussy, The Property of a Lady, The Living Daylights, and 007 in New York. Those are all included in Quantum of Solace as a collection. These were originally published in separate collections during Ian Fleming's lifetime. Everything is still in print as far as I know. I'm not discussing today the continuation novels by various authors. I've read them all. I have favorites among those. I think most of them are pretty good. But I'm not talking about those today. We're just sticking with Ian Fleming. Fleming is constantly in print. Here is a 1970s hardcover compilation, 5 complete novels, which includes Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Casino Royale, and Live and Let Die. A typical saucy cover, as I refer to them, which is part of the James Bond mythology. Fun stuff to read. Good collection if you can get it. Is this one here. There are many others. Different editions are available. Here are 3 paperbacks from my collection that feature the image of Sean Connery on the cover, and that would include From Russia with Love, which has Connery here, and that's a Walther PPK. We'll talk about that in a moment. And Diamonds Are Forever, of course, and then Thunderball. These books all feature Sean Connery on the cover. There are other paperbacks out there. I have everything. I don't have every different set of paperbacks that were published. Dr. No, From Russia with Love. These are the 1970s reprints. Here's the famous Goldfinger cover with the nude girl on the cover. And, of course, the earlier ones that I read were these. They looked like this. They had a James Bond thriller on the side. And these were the ones that I first read when I was a kid. And so that was The Spy Who Loved Me. Here's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Just to show you a few. I'm not going to show you all of them. And You Only Live Twice. The best way to approach Ian Fleming's James Bond novels is to read them in order, in my opinion. I think that you'll get a better sense for the character. The character is obviously much different in the books than he is in the films, although Sean Connery clearly embodied the role. James Bond in the original books, and here's another edition of Casino Royale, which was the first one. James Bond was really a grumpy British civil servant working for the government, and he had a license to kill. He was a spy, but he was a grumpy guy. He is described in these novels as looking like Hoagie Carmichael, with a scar on his face. That did not translate to the motion pictures. They ended up with Sean Connery, who eventually, in my understanding, is Ian Fleming. At first wasn't sure of Connery, and then came around. He realized that Connery was really great as James Bond, so much so that in a later book, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Ian Fleming gave James Bond a Scottish background as a nod to Sean Connery. Imagine that. And then, of course, there was only one more after that, which was The Man with the Golden Gun. I think The Man with the Golden Gun was published posthumously. And then it was over with. Fleming died young, and he had a heart attack. And that's a shame. Some of these Penguin paperbacks from, a decade ago have great covers. And this was a great series. I rebought the whole series, and I read them all in order again. And that's the way to do it. As I said, if you're going to read these, read them in order, because that's the way to do it. Now, Goldfinger is probably one of the best of the films. It's interesting to me, for those of you that are familiar with the motion pictures, the gimmicks and things, that's really not part of the books. It is true, however, that James Bond carried a Walther PPK. And the Walther PPK was introduced in Dr. No, which was book number 6 in the series. And my understanding is, and here's another copy of Dr. No. Yes, I'm a collector. I have several copies. A reader had written to Ian Fleming and recommended a better firearm because Bond was using a Beretta. So in the second chapter of Dr. No, they introduced the Walther PPK. Major Boothroyd comes in. I believe that character is named after the reader who sent Fleming this information. And the Walther PPK was chosen as the gun, which became the gun used predominantly in the early films. Later on, they changed it up. And in the continuation novels, some of these other authors felt that they would get cute and they would mix it up and try different guns. But it's the Walther PPK that James Bond carried, which is a German firearm. This is the gun that Adolf Hitler allegedly killed himself with. It is a World War II era firearm. This is mine. And the reason I own a Walther PPK is because of Ian Fleming. The reason that James Bond carried it was because a reader had written to Fleming. It's actually, in the book, they described the gun as having a little more punch or something. I forget how he worded it, for Bond, and it does. If you are interested in learning about firearms, obviously do so with safety in mind. Consult with a firearms instructor and see if you can shoot a Walther PPK. It's an interesting gun. I carried this for a long time until I switched it up as my travel gun. I still take it with me if I go up to the cabin. I like to have the Walther. It's a PPK available. Mine is calibered in .380. So there you go. It's a nice little gun to have. It's a good concealed carry gun. James Bond would carry his under his suit coat in one of those smooth little holsters that was really flat. I think that's apparent. I think they showed Connery using that, a holster like that in some of the early films. So the Walther PPK, just had to show that off, what can I say? So, anyways, read the books in order. All right, it's really interesting to see how the character developed. What are the best ones? That's really up to you to decide. I think the first one is a masterpiece. I think some of the other ones that I like, Dr. No, by the way, where the Walther PPK is introduced, is really a riveting adventure novel. Fleming really puts Bond through the paces in that. He puts him on that island with Dr. No, and he has to survive climbing through the ventilation system. He's got the water coming, the heat, the cold. All of these things are happening to him, and he gets knocked about quite a lot. Dr. No, I think, is underrated as far as its reputation among fans. Other notable books. Goldfinger is a fun book to read. I think that for the later novels, I really think On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a great novel, really fun. By that time, it was nearing the end of Fleming's life, and he was starting to be influenced by his own reputation, by the reputation of the films. So there's a little more womanizing going on in some of these later books than you have in the earlier ones, although Bond was always a womanizer. That's just the nature of James Bond. One of the interesting ones is Moonraker, which was number 3. Bond is still really depicted here as a grumpy civil servant. Interesting book. I love them all. I really do. I think that of all the books, the one that's the least successful to me was probably the last one, The Man with the Golden Gun. But it's still a good book. It's a really good book. It's just not up to the quality of the later ones. In The Man with the Golden Gun, James Bond ends up in the United States, and it's interesting to get Fleming's take on that. Now, if you're interested in Fleming's other works, obviously he had a couple of other books out there. I think Thrilling Cities was his nonfiction work, and The Diamond Smugglers was a nonfiction work that he did. He was a journalist. He wrote travel pieces for magazines and newspapers. Excellent writer all the way around. So, Ian Fleming, James Bond, Sean Connery. That's what this episode is about. And if you get a chance, be sure to check them out. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. These Penguin books, by the way, from about a decade ago, are now collector's items because they're no longer publishing these with these fantastic covers. They were uniform, so they all had the same artist working on them. Really fun material to look at. And either way, no matter how you read the books, no matter if you're looking at the older paperbacks or the really old paperbacks, however you do it, I do recommend reading them in order. I think you'll get a better sense of the character. More importantly than that, I think you're going to get a sense on what a really superb writer Ian Fleming was. People don't talk about that as much as I think they should. They talk about the character more than they talk about the fact that Ian Fleming was just a superb, excellent writer. He could create circumstances, scenes, and characterizations and action sequences that were just fantastic, and that's why the books were popular. He really had it down, he was really a man of adventure. When Ian Fleming sat down at that typewriter, it flowed, a much better writer than I think a lot of the fans give him credit for. I don't pay attention to a lot of that stuff by these people reading them later on. who really don't understand the character. They're coming at it from the perspective of only having seen the movies and then thinking it's going to be the same. Much different character. I do love the movies. When a new Bond movie comes out, my wife and I do go see the new Bond movies. We're looking forward to the new one with Daniel Craig. I'm not going to comment on the actors, except to say that I believe Sean Connery, from my biased opinion, is the best film version of James Bond. So a tip of the Stetson to Sean Connery. Ian Fleming, all right? Great material. Casino Royale, start right here. James Bond. Thank you again for checking into McNulty's Book Corral. Stay well, stay happy, feed your brain. Read a book.